I spent 20 days in the hospital fighting a severe blood infection, staring at the sterile white ceiling and praying someone, anyone from my family, would walk through the door. Not one person came. Not my father Marcus, not my mother Vivian, not even my sister Chloe. But exactly 1 month later, my phone lit up with an urgent text from my mother. "We need $15,000 for your sister's bridal dress at the Beverly Hills boutique today. Send it now." I sat in the center of my living room on my dark velvet sofa, perfectly still. The silence of my penthouse was a sharp contrast to the beeping monitors and the agonizing pain I had endured alone just weeks prior. I did not cry. I did not type out an angry paragraph. I simply opened my banking app, entered exactly $1, and hit transfer. I followed it with a text that said good luck. Before I tell you what happened when my family realized their personal ATM had officially closed its doors, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever had to cut off toxic relatives to save your own peace. My name is Maya, and I am 32 years old. To the outside world, my family looked like the absolute picture of success in our upscale Atlanta suburb. My father Marcus loved to play the role of the strict patriarch, constantly reminding me of my financial obligations to the family. My mother Vivian lived for her social standing, obsessed with maintaining her flawless image at Sunday service and charity galas. Then there was Chloe, my 27-year-old sister. She was the undeniable golden child, beautiful, deeply materialistic, and currently engaged to Spencer, a man from an allegedly wealthy white family. For years, my parents used guilt and the unspoken expectations of our culture to drain my bank accounts. They called it family duty, but it was nothing more than financial exploitation. I was the scapegoat, the daughter who was never quite good enough for their praise, but always wealthy enough to fund their extravagant lifestyles. I had spent my entire 20s building a highly successful medical billing and asset management company from the ground up. I worked 80-hour weeks, sacrificed my personal life, and turned a small startup into a massive enterprise. My family never asked about my long hours or the immense stress of running a corporation. They only cared that the supplemental credit cards I gave them remained active for their use. But lying in that hospital bed, hovering between life and death, while my mother and sister shopped for wedding venues, a cold realization washed over me. Family is supposed to hold your hand when you are broken, not pick your pockets while you bleed. It all started on a Tuesday evening 3 weeks earlier. I was sitting in my corner office reviewing a quarterly financial report when the first wave of pain hit. It was not just a dull ache. It felt like a serrated blade twisting deep into my lower right abdomen. I tried to stand, reaching for the edge of my mahogany desk to steady myself, but my legs gave out completely. I collapsed onto the carpet, gasping for air as cold sweat drenched my silk blouse. My assistant found me barely conscious and immediately called an ambulance. The ride to the hospital was a chaotic blur of flashing red lights and the frantic voices of paramedics shouting my plunging blood pressure levels. My appendix had ruptured. By the time they wheeled me through the emergency room doors, the infection had already seeped into my bloodstream, triggering severe sepsis. They rushed me straight into emergency surgery to flush out the toxins and remove the ruptured organ. I did not have time to think, let alone make a phone call to warn anyone. I was simply fighting to survive the night. When I finally opened my eyes, the harsh fluorescent lights of the intensive care unit blinded me. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor was the only sound anchoring me to reality. Every muscle in my body ached, and an intravenous line fed heavy antibiotics directly into my vein. I felt small, fragile, and utterly terrified. A nurse named Carla walked into the room, her soft rubber shoes squeaking against the linoleum floor. She checked the monitors, offered a sympathetic smile, and gently adjusted my pillows. "You gave us quite a scare, Maya," Carla said, her voice calm and professional. "The infection was severe, but the surgery was successful. You are going to be here for a while, though. We need to monitor the sepsis around the clock. Do you have an emergency contact we can call? Someone who can bring you some personal items, handle your discharge paperwork, and just sit with you today?" I nodded weakly. My throat was so dry it felt like sandpaper, but I managed to whisper my mother's phone number. Despite everything, despite the years of passive-aggressive comments and endless financial demands, I still believed my mother would drop everything for me in a life-or-death situation. I still held on to the naive hope that seeing her eldest daughter hooked up to machines would strip away her obsession with status and reveal the maternal love I so desperately craved. Carla handed me my personal cell phone, which the paramedics had brought along with my purse. I dialed Vivian's number, my hands trembling from the lingering anesthesia and the overwhelming desire to hear a comforting voice. The phone rang 4 times. On the 5th ring, the call connected, but instead of a concerned greeting, I was hit with a wall of noise. I could hear classical music playing in the background, women laughing, and the distinct clinking of champagne flutes. "Maya, I told you not to call me today," Vivian snapped. Her voice was a hushed, irritated whisper, like I had just interrupted a sacred ceremony. I am sitting in the VIP lounge of a bridal boutique in Beverly Hills. Spencer's mother and aunt are sitting right across from me. Do you have any idea how important this is? Mom! My voice broke a pathetic sound that I instantly hated. Mom, I am at Atlanta General. I collapsed at work. My appendix ruptured and I have a severe blood infection. I just got out of emergency surgery. I need you to come to the hospital. There was a heavy pause on the other end of the line. For a fraction of a second, I waited for the panic. I waited for her to drop her glass to tell Chloe they needed to leave to ask me what room I was in. Instead, I heard her let out a long, dramatic sigh of pure inconvenience. Are you kidding me right now? Maya, Vivian hissed, stepping further away from her wealthy guests, but keeping her tone dripping with venom. You are calling me with this drama today of all days. Chloe is trying on a $20,000 Vera Wang gown. Spencer's family flew in from out of state just for this fitting. They are old money, Maya. They judge everything we do. If I leave right now, they are going to look down on this entire family. I gripped the phone tighter, the sharp physical pain in my abdomen suddenly rivaled by the crushing emotional weight pressing against my chest. You are choosing a dress fitting over your daughter in the intensive care unit. Do not play the victim with me, Vivian snapped back, her voice rising with defensive anger. You are 32 years old, and you own a multi-million-dollar company. You can afford the best private nurses in the city. You do not need me sitting by your bed holding your hand. I raised you to be a strong, independent black woman, did I not? Besides, you are always too busy to come to Sunday dinner, so why should I drop the most critical social event of your sister's life just because you neglected your own health? Mom, I could die, I pleaded, desperate to make her understand. The doctor said the infection is spreading rapidly. Stop being so dramatic, Vivian interrupted effortlessly. You are awake and talking on the phone so clearly you are not dying. Look, pay your own medical bills, hire someone to bring your clothes, and do not embarrass us by making a scene. We have to secure this marriage. Chloe getting into Spencer's family elevates all of us. You have the money, but she has the connections. It is your responsibility to support this family, not distract from our success. Do not call me again until we are done here. The line went dead. I lay there in the sterile hospital bed listening to the dial tone echo in my ear. I slowly lowered the phone to my chest. The beeping of my heart monitor remained steady, but inside an entire foundation of familial loyalty was quietly crumbling to dust. She did not ask how the surgery went. She did not ask if I was in pain. She only cared that my near-death experience was an inconvenience to her social climbing agenda. I closed my eyes, letting the reality of her words wash over me. I was not a daughter to them. I was a safety net. I was the workhorse meant to fund their extravagant attempts to impress a white family that looked down on them anyway. I was the wallet that paid for the luxury cars, the country club memberships, and the very credit card Vivian was probably preparing to swipe at that boutique. The cultural expectation that I had to carry my family financially just because I was successful had been used against me for the absolute last time. When Carla walked back into the room a few minutes later, she carried a cup of ice chips and a warm blanket. She looked at my face, likely expecting to see tears, but my eyes were completely dry. "Did you reach your mother?" Carla asked gently. "Is someone coming to sit with you?" I placed my phone face down on the bedside table. My voice was no longer raspy or weak. It was cold, clear, and absolute. "No," I replied. "Nobody is coming. I am handling this entirely on my own." The next 5 days were a relentless blur of aggressive antibiotics, spiking fevers, and the agonizing ache of my surgical incision. Sepsis is not just a medical condition. It feels like your blood is literally on fire while your bones turn to solid ice. Nurses rotated in and out of my room around the clock, monitoring my vitals, changing my intravenous bags, and helping me complete the exhausting task of simply sitting up in bed. During the darkest hours of those nights when the hospital ward was terrifyingly quiet, I broke the promise I had made to myself. I reached for my phone. My fingers trembled as I typed out short, desperate updates. I texted my mother, my father, and even Chloe. I told them my fever spiked again today. I told them the doctors were worried about my kidney function. I begged them to just call me for 5 minutes. I watched the little gray text bubbles turn blue on my screen. Read, read, read. Not a single reply came back. Not a missed call, not a voice note, not even a generic emoji to acknowledge that the eldest daughter of their so-called perfect family was fighting for her life alone in a sterile room. By the end of my first week, my condition stabilized enough for me to be moved from the intensive care unit to a standard recovery room. My body was slowly winning the physical war against the infection, but the absolute silence from my family was destroying my spirit. The pacing of time in a hospital bed forces you to sit with your thoughts. There are no distractions, no corporate meetings, no spreadsheets to hide behind. There is only the steady rhythm of the heart monitor and the crushing weight of reality. It was my chosen family who stepped up to fill the void. My operations manager, a fiercely loyal woman named Tasha, came by every single evening after work. She brought fresh pajamas, my favorite herbal tea, and a warmth that I desperately needed. My college roommate David would sit in the uncomfortable vinyl visitor chair for hours, typing away on his laptop just so I would not have to wake up in an empty room. They brushed my hair. They made sure I ate the bland hospital food. They became the village my blood relatives completely refused to be. When Tasha gently asked me if my parents were planning to visit, I looked away and lied. I told her they were caught up in severe travel delays and could not make it back to Atlanta. I was deeply ashamed to admit the truth. The shame of being unloved by your own mother is a heavy, suffocating blanket. You try to rationalize it. You convince yourself that you must have done something wrong to deserve the neglect, that if you just worked a little harder or gave a little more, they would finally see your value. On day 14, my phone buzzed on the bedside table. The screen lit up with a message from my father, Marcus. My heart leapt in my chest. A naive, pathetic part of my inner child thought he was finally checking in, that the parental instinct had finally kicked in. I opened the message. "Maya, the catering company for Chloe's reception, needs a deposit by tomorrow morning. Your mother said your platinum card was declining on their end. Call your bank and fix the limit immediately. Spencer's parents are watching everything we do. Do not make us look broke." I stared at the glowing screen until the words blurred into meaningless shapes. He did not ask how my surgery went. He did not ask if I was in pain, or when I was being discharged, or if I needed anything at all. He only cared that my credit card was not functioning properly for a party I was currently too sick to attend. I did not cry. I think my body simply had no tears left to give. Instead, a cold, heavy numbness settled deep into my chest. I asked Tasha to bring my secure work laptop from the office. Propped up against the stiff hospital pillows, I logged into my personal and business banking accounts. I spent the next several days doing a rigorous forensic audit of my own family. The numbers on the screen told a brutal, undeniable story. Over the last 4 years, I had paid off 2 of my parents' mortgages. I had bought my father a luxury vehicle so he could maintain his image as a successful patriarch at his Sunday church services and his exclusive country club. I had fully funded Chloe's undergraduate degree, paid the rent on her upscale apartment, and bankrolled her designer wardrobe so she could attract a man exactly like Spencer. I had been paying the family tax on steroids, carrying the financial weight of an entire household, under the guise of cultural duty and respect. Then I looked at the specific transactions from the last 2 weeks, the exact days I had been hooked to life support. While I was sweating through hospital sheets and shivering from fever chills, Vivian had charged $14,000 at high-end boutiques. Chloe had swiped my card for a luxury spa weekend with her bridesmaids. Marcus had billed massive dinners at upscale steakhouses to my account. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. I was not a daughter. I was a financial tool. I was the silent sponsor of their performance. They loved the prestige my money bought them, but they despised the independence it gave me. In their eyes, my sole purpose was to bleed quietly, so they could wear silk and pretend they belonged in a social class they could not actually afford. The quiet hum of the oxygen machine became the soundtrack to my awakening. The grief of losing a family is profound, but mourning a family that never truly existed is a completely different kind of agony. I was mourning the illusion of unconditional love. I realized that my mother did not want a relationship with me. She wanted a relationship with my bank account. My father did not want a successful daughter to be proud of. He wanted a compliant machine to fund his ego. By day 20, the doctors declared my blood infection completely cleared. I was physically weak. I had lost 15 pounds, and walking from the bed to the bathroom still required immense effort. But mentally, I had never been sharper. I closed my laptop and looked out the hospital window at the Atlanta skyline. They wanted my money to buy their way into Spencer's old money world. They believed they were entitled to the empire I built with my own bare hands. But they had made a fatal miscalculation. They forgot that the same ruthless determination it took to build a multi-million-dollar enterprise from absolutely nothing is the exact same determination it takes to burn a bridge entirely to the ground. I was discharged on a rainy Thursday morning. Tasha drove me back to my penthouse. I did not send a single text to Vivian, Marcus, or Chloe to let them know I was alive. They had shown me exactly where I stood in their hierarchy, and I was finally ready to accept it. The bank was officially closed, and the Maya they knew had died in that hospital bed. Stepping into the quiet sanctuary of my penthouse, the contrast to the chaotic hospital ward was jarring. Tasha helped me to the velvet sofa, set a glass of water on the coffee table, and offered to stay the night. I thanked her profusely, but insisted I needed to be alone. As the heavy oak door clicked shut behind her, the absolute silence of my home wrapped around me. A month ago, this silence would have felt isolating. Today it felt like a fortress. My body was still incredibly frail. The surgical incision pulled painfully when I breathed too deeply, and the lingering fatigue of sepsis made my limbs feel like lead. I should have been resting. I should have been crying. Society expects a daughter discarded by her family to weep, to ask what she did wrong, to mourn the maternal love she never received. I shed no tears. The fire that had burned through my veins in the intensive care unit had incinerated any remaining trace of naive loyalty. What was left behind was pure, unadulterated resolve. I moved slowly to my home office, lowering myself into the leather ergonomic chair. I opened my secure corporate laptop, the screen illuminating my face in the dim room. I was no longer the wounded child begging for her mother's attention. I was the chief executive officer of a highly profitable asset management firm, and I was about to execute the most critical restructuring of my career. I was cutting off my most toxic liabilities. I dialed the direct line to my private wealth manager, Richard. He picked up on the second ring, his voice warm and professional, asking how my recovery was progressing. I cut through the pleasantries immediately. My voice was steady, stripped of any emotion. I need an immediate total freeze on all supplementary accounts tied to my primary portfolio, I instructed. Richard paused, his keyboard clicking faintly in the background. Maya, just to confirm this, includes the platinum tier accounts, the ones issued to Vivian, Marcus, and Chloe. Yes, I replied. Cancel them. Do not temporarily suspend them. Terminate the lines of credit entirely. I want the accounts closed, the recurring auto payments canceled, and any pending authorizations blocked. I knew exactly what I was dismantling. I was severing the financial umbilical cord that had sustained their elaborate masquerade. I pictured the black card my father used to lease his imported sports car and cover the exorbitant monthly dues at his exclusive country club. I pictured the platinum account my mother treated as a limitless fund for designer handbags, expensive salon treatments, and charitable donations she made in her own name to buy influence at our church. I pictured the allowance account that paid the rent on Chloe's luxury downtown loft and funded the lavish lifestyle she paraded on social media. They had built an entire kingdom on my back, and I was pulling out the foundational pillars. Richard confirmed the action. The cards will decline immediately, Maya. Should I have our fraud department flag any further attempts to access your primary accounts? I told him yes. I listened to his keystrokes, each one feeling like a heavy iron chain snapping off my shoulders. When he confirmed the accounts were officially closed, I thanked him and hung up. My next call was to Evelyn, my corporate attorney and estate planner. Evelyn was a ruthless, brilliant woman who had helped me navigate complex acquisitions in the medical billing sector. She answered quickly, her tone shifting to business the moment she heard my voice. I did not waste time. Evelyn, I need to completely restructure my estate, I said. I want Vivian, Marcus, and Chloe permanently removed from my will, my medical directives, and my corporate succession plans as of this exact moment. Lying in the hospital, a horrifying thought had occurred to me. If the sepsis had claimed my life, my family would have inherited my empire. They would have liquidated the company I built from nothing, fired my loyal employees, and used the capital to fund Spencer's failing family business and Chloe's extravagant wedding. The realization made me physically ill. I instructed Evelyn to draft an ironclad trust. My assets were to be left to charitable organizations focused on medical debt relief and to a protective trust for my key employees. We need to make sure this is airtight, Evelyn advised, sensing the gravity of my request. If they attempt to contest the changes by claiming you are medically compromised from the sepsis, we need preemptive measures. I instructed her to arrange an immediate, independent psychological evaluation to certify my competency. I also officially revoked the medical proxy my mother had technically held for years, a proxy she had not bothered to use when I was actually dying. I transferred my medical and legal power of attorney to Tasha and my business partner. For over an hour, I sat on the phone with Evelyn, meticulously building legal barricades around my life. In our community, the black tax is a heavy, unspoken burden. If you make it out, if you achieve financial success, you are expected to pull everyone else up with you. But pulling my family up had turned into carrying them entirely while they actively tried to bury me. I had allowed them to confuse my generosity with weakness. I had let them believe my money was family money, while my pain was entirely my own. That dynamic ended today. When I finally closed the laptop, a profound silence settled over the room again. The physical exertion of sitting upright and talking for 2 hours caught up with me. My abdomen throbbed, and a dull ache settled behind my eyes. Yet my spirit felt lighter than it had in a decade. I slowly made my way back to the velvet sofa in the living room and laid down, pulling a soft throw blanket over my legs. I knew exactly what was coming. I had not sent a single text to my mother or sister. I had not answered my father's demanding messages. I was operating in total silence, waiting for the reality of their situation to hit them exactly where it would hurt the most. Their image was everything to them. Vivian cared more about impressing Spencer's old money family than she cared about her own flesh and blood. Marcus cared more about showing off at the steakhouse than showing up at my hospital bed. Chloe cared only about her status. I pictured them at their high-end boutiques, at their country clubs, at their lavish lunches. I pictured the moment the cashier would hand the card back with an apologetic smile. I pictured the embarrassment, the confusion, the sudden frantic realization that the limitless well had run dry. I left my cell phone on the coffee table face up. I turned off the ringer, but left the screen notifications active. I wanted to see the exact moment the panic set in. I wanted a digital record of their desperation. I closed my eyes and rested, letting the quiet strength of my newfound freedom wash over me. I was no longer their victim. I was the architect of my own life, and the eviction notice had just been served. The 30 days that followed my hospital discharge were a masterclass in the art of silence. I had expected an immediate explosive barrage of calls the moment the first credit card was declined. I anticipated furious voicemails and unannounced visits to my penthouse. But the eruption did not come right away. Instead, there was a deafening, stubborn standoff. Knowing my parents, I understood exactly what was happening. Pride and delusion are a dangerous combination. When the platinum cards were swiped and rejected, Vivian and Marcus likely convinced themselves it was a banking error. When Richard, my wealth manager, formally notified them that the accounts were permanently closed at my directive, their arrogance must have taken over. They probably assumed I was throwing a temporary tantrum. In their minds, I was just the rebellious bank waiting to be disciplined. They likely tapped into whatever liquid savings they had left, desperately swiping their own meager credit lines to keep up the charade in front of Spencer and his wealthy family. They were playing a game of chicken, fully expecting me to crawl back, apologize for my insubordination, and turn the financial tap back on. They fundamentally misunderstood the rules of the game. I was no longer playing. I used that month to rebuild my physical strength and fortify my mental armor. My incision healed into a neat silver scar, a permanent physical reminder of the day I stopped bleeding for people who would not offer me a bandage. I returned to my company with a renewed, almost lethal level of focus. Without the constant draining anxiety of managing my family's manufactured crises, my business acumen sharpened. We acquired two smaller medical billing firms in those 30 days, expanding our market share across the Southeast. My wealth grew, my health returned, and my peace of mind was absolute. The silence broke exactly 32 days after I was discharged. I was sitting in my corner office, sunlight pouring through the floor-to-ceiling windows, highlighting the bustling Atlanta traffic far below. I was reviewing a lucrative merger contract when my personal cell phone buzzed on the glass desk. The screen illuminated, displaying a name that had not graced my phone since the day I lay dying in the intensive care unit. Vivian. I did not feel the familiar spike of cortisol in my chest. My heart rate did not accelerate. I simply reached for the device with a steady hand and unlocked the screen. The message was a masterpiece of narcissistic entitlement, completely devoid of basic human decency. There was no greeting. There was no inquiry about whether I had survived the sepsis, whether I was back at work, or whether I was experiencing any lingering pain. It was just a cold, demanding directive. Maya, the bridal boutique, is threatening to cancel the custom order for Chloe's gown. Spencer's mother is asking uncomfortable questions about the delay. We need $15,000 wired to my account immediately. Do not use the frozen cards, just send a direct wire. We are running out of time and this wedding is too important. Send it now. I read the words twice, letting the sheer, unadulterated audacity wash over me. In a twisted way, it was almost poetic. She had not spoken to me in a month, had left me to rot in a hospital bed so she could attend the initial fitting for this exact dress, and was now demanding I pay for the very garment she had prioritized over my life. The entitlement was so profound, it bordered on clinical delusion. She truly believed that after abandoning me, cutting me off, and draining my resources for years, she could simply snap her fingers and summon a $15,000 wire transfer. The old Maya would have experienced a total emotional collapse. The old Maya would have felt the crushing weight of the black tax, the suffocating guilt of potentially ruining her sister's wedding, and the desperate, pathetic need to buy her mother's fleeting approval. I would have logged into my bank, transferred the funds, and then cried myself to sleep, wondering why my generosity was never rewarded with love. But the woman sitting in that leather executive chair was a stranger to Vivian. I was completely, terrifyingly calm. I felt a cool, crystalline amusement settling over me. I leaned back in my chair, resting my phone in the palm of my hand. I thought about the thousands of dollars I had poured into this family. I thought about the mortgage payments, the luxury cars, the designer shoes, and the endless stream of cash that had vanished into the black hole of their vanity. They thought my wealth was their birthright. They thought my success belonged to them. I opened my secure mobile banking application. The facial recognition software scanned my features and unlocked a dashboard displaying balances that my parents could not fathom in their wildest dreams. I navigated to the external wire transfer menu. I selected Vivian's primary checking account, the one I had linked years ago to cover her emergency expenses. The interface prompted me to enter the transfer amount. I tapped the screen with deliberate, precise movements. I did not enter $15,000. I did not enter 1,000. I did not enter 100. I typed the number 1, followed by a decimal point, followed by 2 zeros, one single solitary dollar. The app prompted me to include an optional memo for the recipient. I clicked the text box. I did not write a lengthy explanation about my pain. I did not list the grievances of my hospital stay or the years of financial abuse. Explanations are for people who seek to be understood, and I no longer cared if Vivian understood me. I only cared that she knew the dynamic was permanently dead. I typed 2 words into the memo line. Good luck. I reviewed the transaction screen. Amount $1. Recipient Vivian. Memo. Good luck. I pressed authorize. The green checkmark appeared on the screen confirming the wire transfer had been successfully initiated and completed. I set the phone back down on my glass desk face up. I picked up my gold monogrammed pen and returned my attention to the merger contract in front of me. I felt no guilt, no remorse, and no fear. For the first time in my 32 years of existence, I had paid exactly what my family's affection was worth. $1. I knew the shockwave that single dollar would create. I knew that within minutes Vivian would receive the push notification from her bank. She would see the deposit alert expecting to see $15,000 securely landed in her account, ready to be swiped at the Beverly Hills boutique. I could almost visualize the exact moment the realization would hit her. The confusion, the squinting at the screen, the sudden breathless realization that the single digit was not a banking error, but a devastating declaration of independence. The silence of the past 32 days was about to shatter into a million pieces. The storm was coming, but I was not scrambling for shelter. I had built a fortress, and I was ready to watch them try to break down the door. The phone on my glass desk remained perfectly still for exactly 12 minutes. I watched the digital clock on my computer monitor flip from 1 minute to the next, tracing the agonizing delay of a woman who had just realized her entire financial reality was an illusion. Vivian was likely scrambling, stepping into a private dressing room, trying to re-enter the numbers, convincing herself that her wealthy, compliant daughter had simply made a typo. Then the phone vibrated, rattling against the glass surface. The caller ID did not display my mother's name. It read Marcus. My father rarely called me during business hours. He preferred to operate through Vivian, maintaining his distance while reaping the rewards of my labor. If he was calling in the middle of a Thursday afternoon, the panic had officially reached the top of the family hierarchy. I took a slow, steady breath, letting the cool air condition fill my lungs, and pressed the green accept button. I put the phone on speaker and set it back down. Maya, what kind of sick, twisted game are you playing with your mother? Marcus did not say hello. He did not ask how I was feeling. His voice was a low, dangerous rumble, vibrating with the kind of patriarchal fury he usually reserved for disobedient children. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the desk. I am not playing a game, Marcus. I am closing my accounts. His sharp intake of breath echoed through the speaker. I could hear the faint, distinct sound of a golf cart engine whining in the background, followed by the clinking of expensive glassware. He was at his exclusive country club, the one where the monthly dues were automatically deducted from my corporate account. You listen to me, and you listen to me very carefully, he growled, his voice dropping an octave to maintain his privacy from whoever was standing nearby. Vivian just called me from Beverly Hills in absolute hysterics. She is sitting in a boutique with Spencer's mother, a woman who comes from a legacy of wealth, and you send a $1 wire transfer, like some kind of disrespectful, ungrateful brat. You are humiliating this family on purpose. I am simply giving you exactly what you gave me when I was lying in a hospital bed with a ruptured appendix. I replied, my voice devoid of any inflection. Nothing. Do not try to spin this and play the victim. Marcus snapped, the familiar edge of manipulation sharpening his words. You had a minor medical issue. You are fine. You are sitting in your fancy office right now, making decisions that could ruin your sister's future. Spencer's family is watching us. They are evaluating us. We are securing a marriage that elevates this entire family, and you are trying to sabotage it because you are jealous. Jealous, I repeated, allowing a dry, humorless laugh to escape my throat. Jealous of a sister who has to use my money to buy a dress to impress a family that secretly looks down on her. I am not jealous, Marcus. I am exhausted. You are arrogant! He shot back, his voice rising, shedding the careful volume control he had tried to maintain. You think because you built a company, you are suddenly above the people who raised you. You think you are exempt from your obligations. We put a roof over your head. We fed you. We clothed you. We gave you the foundation to become who you are. In our community, when one of us makes it, we all make it. You owe this family your success. There it was, the ultimate weapon in his arsenal, the invisible contract I had supposedly signed the day I was born. It is a toxic narrative disguised as cultural solidarity. The expectation that my financial success was a communal asset, a debt I had to repay for the basic necessities of childhood. I do not owe you a return on investment for basic parenting, I said, my words slicing through his tirade with surgical precision. Raising a child is a legal and moral obligation, not a financial loan you get to collect on with interest. You did not build my company. You did not stay awake for 72 hours straight pitching to investors. You did not risk your livelihood. I did. You just showed up when the checks started clearing. How dare you speak to me like that? Marcus bellowed. The sound of the golf cart stopped completely. I am your father. You will show me respect. Turn those credit cards back on immediately. My card was just declined at the clubhouse dining room in front of 3 managing partners from a law firm. The waiter had to come back to the table and tell me my account was frozen. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that is? Do you have any idea what you have done to my reputation? I did not freeze the cards, Marcus. I permanently closed them. You are going to have to pay for your own ribeye steaks from now on. And Vivian is going to have to figure out how to pay for that wedding dress without my portfolio backing her up. The silence on the line was thick, heavy with the sudden terrifying realization that I was not bluffing. The authoritative patriarch routine was failing, and he could feel his control slipping through his fingers. If you do this, Marcus said, his voice dropping into a cold, venomous sneer, you are dead to us. Do you hear me? If you cut off your own blood, you will have no family left. We will make sure everyone in Atlanta knows exactly how you treat your parents. We will tell the church. We will tell our community. We will tell everyone that beneath all your money, you are a bitter, selfish woman who turned her back on the people who loved her. You will be a pariah. He was bringing out the heavy artillery, the threat of social exile, the threat of turning my name into a cautionary tale among our peers. He expected me to beg. He expected the fear of public shaming to force me into submission. You cannot fire me from a job I already quit, I said softly, the absolute certainty of my words ringing through the speaker. Tell the church, Marcus. Tell your friends. Tell Spencer's incredibly wealthy family. But remember, if you want to tell them that I cut you off, you are going to have to admit to all of them that you have been living on your daughter's payroll for the last 5 years. You are going to have to admit that the luxury cars, the club memberships, and the designer clothes were all bought with my money. Are you really willing to destroy your own carefully crafted illusion of wealth just to smear my name? He gasped, a sharp, ragged sound of a man completely cornered by his own vanity. He knew I was right. His pride would never allow him to confess his financial dependence to the elite social circles he desperately wanted to impress. He was trapped in a cage of his own making, and I had just thrown away the key. You are a monster, he whispered, the rage replaced by a hollow, defeated bitterness. No, I replied, my gaze fixed on the bright Atlanta skyline outside my window. I am just a businesswoman restructuring my assets. Have a nice afternoon, Marcus. I reached forward and pressed the red button, severing the connection. I immediately opened my phone settings, navigated to his contact profile, and hit block. I did the exact same thing for Vivian and Chloe. The digital walls of my fortress were now fully secured. I leaned back in my chair, the residual adrenaline slowly fading from my bloodstream. The threat of their public retaliation loomed, but it felt remarkably small compared to the magnitude of my freedom. They would undoubtedly try to retaliate. They would spin narratives, launch smear campaigns, and attempt to assassinate my character through the back channels of our social circles, but I was miles ahead of them. I turned my attention back to the merger contract on my desk, my mind already calculating my next strategic move. My family wanted to play dirty to protect their fragile status. They wanted to wage a war to maintain their proximity to Spencer's old money family. They had no idea that I was already holding the deed to the very battlefield they were standing on. My personal cell phone remained blissfully silent, the blocked contacts functioning exactly as intended. However, I had underestimated my mother's sheer terrifying desperation. Less than 10 minutes after I disconnected the call with Marcus, the sleek multi-line console on my desk began to chime. The caller ID displayed an incoming transfer from the main reception desk downstairs. I pressed the intercom button. Tasha spoke through the speaker, her voice laced with heavy hesitation. Maya, I am so sorry to interrupt your review. I have a woman on line 3 demanding to be patched through. She bypassed the automated directory and claims it is an absolute emergency. She says she is calling from a boutique in Beverly Hills and that she is your mother. I smiled a cold, razor-sharp smile. Vivian was resourceful, I had to give her that. When the digital door slammed in her face, she simply walked around to the corporate entrance. Put her through, Tasha, I said evenly. And Tasha, do not apologize. You are doing your job. A sharp click echoed through the speakerphone as the line connected. I did not offer a greeting. I simply waited. You insolent, vicious little girl, Vivian hissed. The pristine audio quality of my office phone captured every ragged, hyperventilating breath she took. Her voice was muffled, indicating she had locked herself inside a fitting room or a restroom to hide her meltdown from the wealthy patrons outside. I had to physically snatch my phone out of the hands of the sales associate. Do you know what it feels like to watch a woman in white gloves stare at you with absolute pity because a wire transfer for $1 single just cleared your account? I am sitting 50 feet away from Spencer's mother. If she finds out my card declined, our reputation is destroyed. Then I suggest you pull out your own wallet, Vivian, I replied, my voice steady and completely devoid of warmth. Or perhaps you can ask Marcus to cover it with his golf club allowance. Oh wait, he cannot do that anymore either. You planned this, Vivian shrieked, the panic finally breaking through her carefully curated transatlantic accent. You waited until the most important day of your sister's life to humiliate us. Spencer's family is American royalty. The Sterling family practically owns the commercial construction sector in their state. This wedding is our entry into a world we have fought our entire lives to reach. We are finally sitting at the elite table, and you are pulling the chair out from under us, out of pure, bitter jealousy. I leaned forward, clasping my hands together on the glass desk. The absolute delusion of her statement was staggering. I am not jealous, Vivian. I am thoroughly disgusted. You are begging for scraps at a table where you will never be respected. You are so obsessed with proximity to whiteness and old money that you are willing to sacrifice your own flesh and blood to buy your way in. That is a lie, Vivian spat defensively. Is it? I challenged, my voice slicing through the air like a scalpel. You left your eldest daughter to die of sepsis in a hospital bed because you could not bear to miss a dress fitting with a white woman who probably locks her purse in her trunk when she drives through our old neighborhood. You are using my black excellence, my grueling 70-hour work weeks, and my corporate success to fund a minstrel show of wealth. You are trying to purchase an invitation to a country club that will always see you as the help. How dare you speak to me about race and class? Vivian gasped, her voice trembling with indignant rage. You know nothing about the sacrifices I made. I am trying to elevate this family. I am securing a legacy for Chloe. You are not securing a legacy, I corrected sharply. You are purchasing a prop. If the Sterling family is so impossibly wealthy, why is Spencer letting his future mother-in-law swipe her card for a $20,000 wedding dress? If they are such royalty, why are they letting the bride's family foot the bill for their extravagant demands? You are not marrying Chloe into wealth, Vivian. You are paying an entrance fee, And you expect me to be the bank that covers the toll. Well, the bank is permanently closed. I will no longer fund your pathetic social climbing. The line went dead silent. I had hit the exact nerve she spent her entire life trying to conceal. I had named the ugly unspoken truth about her desperation for elite validation. I gave you life, Vivian finally whispered, dropping the aggressive tone and pivoting seamlessly to the ultimate guilt trip. I am your mother. You owe me everything. You gave me life, I replied, but you expected me to pay rent on it from the moment I received my first paycheck. You did not want a daughter. You wanted a financial mule. I have paid off your mortgage. I have bought your cars. I have funded your charities so you could sit in the front pew at church and pretend you were a philanthropist. I have paid my debt to you 100 times over. We are done. If you do this, Maya Vivian said, her voice dropping into a menacing, icy register. If you abandon your family on the eve of this wedding, I will make sure you have nothing left. I will go to Reverend Thomas. I will go to the church elders. I will post on every social media platform we have. I will tell the entire community that you are a selfish, wicked woman who turned her back on her sister out of spite. I will ruin your reputation in Atlanta. I looked at the framed Forbes magazine feature hanging on my office wall, a testament to the empire I had built entirely independent of her social circles. Post whatever you want, Vivian, I said calmly. Go to the church. Tell the choir. Tell the entire congregation. But remember this. When you tell them I cut you off, you are going to have to explain why you needed my money in the first place. You are going to have to confess to your elite new friends that your entire lifestyle is a fraud, funded by the daughter you just abandoned. Burn my name all you want, but you will have to set yourself on fire to do it. I reached forward and disconnected the call. I did not block the corporate line. I simply instructed Tasha to redirect any future calls from Beverly Hills directly to the legal department's voicemail. I sat back in my chair, the silence of the office wrapping around me once again. The confrontation was over, but the war had just been declared. I knew exactly what Vivian would do next. She was a creature of habit, and her habits were entirely predictable. Deprived of my financial resources, she would immediately pivot to weaponizing her social influence. She would try to destroy my character to protect her own. Less than 2 hours later, the digital assault began. My tablet chimed with the notification from a mutual acquaintance. I opened the application to find a lengthy tear-stained video posted directly to Chloe's public page. Chloe was sitting in the passenger seat of a luxury vehicle, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, wearing the exact expression of a martyred saint. Below the video was a sprawling multi-paragraph caption detailing how her heart was broken because her wealthy corporate sister had inexplicably decided to sabotage her dream wedding out of pure malicious jealousy. Within minutes, Vivian shared the post to her own profile, adding a heavily quoted Bible verse about the wickedness of greed and the heartbreak of raising an ungrateful child. The comments began rolling in instantly. Church members, distant relatives, and family friends poured in with their sympathies, offering prayers for Vivian and Chloe while condemning my alleged cruelty. They painted a picture of a loving family devastated by a ruthless, money-hungry businesswoman. I scrolled through the comments, watching the outrage machine churn. They were trying to back me into a corner, hoping the public humiliation would force me to open my checkbook to buy their silence. They thought the threat of social exile would break my resolve. I simply locked my tablet, placed it in my desk drawer, and went back to work. Let them type. Let them pray. Let them spin their elaborate fairy tales for an audience of hypocrites. They were wasting their energy fighting a public relations battle, completely unaware that I had already shifted the war to a much higher, far more devastating financial arena. The digital assault did not end with a single tearful video. It mutated into a highly organized, relentless smear campaign designed to completely assassinate my character across every social circle we shared in Atlanta. For a family that had spent decades meticulously curating a flawless public image, Vivian, Marcus, and Chloe were shockingly eager to air their fabricated dirty laundry. But they were playing to an audience they knew how to manipulate perfectly. By Sunday morning, Vivian had officially weaponized the pulpit. I did not need to step foot inside the sanctuary of our prominent megachurch to know exactly what was happening. My phone essentially broadcast the service to me via a barrage of incoming voicemails and text messages. According to Tasha, whose mother attended the same congregation, Vivian sat in the front pew, dressed in somber, elegant black, dabbing at her dry eyes with a lace handkerchief. She had clearly scheduled a private meeting with Pastor Thomas before the service. When the sermon began, it was a masterclass in targeted spiritual warfare. The pastor delivered a booming, impassioned message about the prodigal daughter, the sin of greed, and the ultimate betrayal of turning your back on the womb that bore you. He spoke about young women who allowed corporate ambition to harden their hearts against their own flesh and blood. He never said my name, but in a congregation of 3,000 people who knew my family, he did not have to. Within hours, my voicemail inbox reached maximum capacity. The messages came from church elders, self-appointed prayer warriors, and older women in the community who had known me since childhood. Their voices dripped with that specific brand of Southern passive-aggressive concern. They told me I needed to seek pastoral counseling. They reminded me of the biblical commandment to honor my father and mother, conveniently ignoring the fact that honoring your parents should not require financing their luxury car leases. They lectured me on the black tax wrapping financial exploitation in the language of cultural solidarity and familial duty. They warned me that God would strip away my wealth if I did not use it to bless my sister's union. Chloe took a different, far more modern approach to her character assassination. She went live on her social media platforms, broadcasting to her thousands of followers. She sat on the edge of her pristine white bed, wearing an oversized sweater to look fragile and exhausted. She expertly weaponized every toxic stereotype available. She painted me as the bitter, lonely, career-obsessed older sister who was fiercely jealous of her younger sister's happiness. She spun a tragic fairy tale about how she was simply trying to marry the man of her dreams, a man from a prominent, wealthy family, and how her cruel sister was using her vast corporate wealth to sabotage the wedding out of pure, unadulterated spite. Spencer even made a brief appearance in the background of one of her live streams. He stood leaning against the doorframe, shaking his head with a look of aristocratic disgust, playing the part of the noble, supportive fiancé shielding his bride from her unstable, toxic relatives. Watching him act superior while knowing his family's actual financial reality was almost comical. Chloe told her audience that I had maliciously frozen the accounts right when she was supposed to pay for her custom gown, framing it as an intentional psychological attack rather than the termination of a parasitic financial arrangement. She cried beautifully for the camera, and the internet rushed to comfort her. But Marcus was the one who crossed the line from social manipulation into professional warfare. My father had always been a man who believed his connections could bend reality to his will. He belonged to an elite fraternity network and several exclusive business associations in the city. When the social shaming did not immediately force me into submission, he decided to attack my livelihood. On Tuesday morning, I was sitting in a strategy meeting when my legal counsel, Evelyn, walked into the room with a grim expression. She asked the junior executives to step out. Once the glass doors closed, she informed me that Marcus had been making phone calls. He had reached out to an old fraternity brother who sat on the board of directors for a major regional hospital network. A network my company was currently in the final stages of acquiring a massive medical billing contract with. Marcus had warned the board member that I had suffered a severe psychological breakdown following my bout with sepsis. He claimed I was acting erratically, making impulsive, destructive financial decisions, and that my company was on the verge of internal collapse because my judgment was compromised. He suggested the hospital network should reconsider signing any long-term contracts with a CEO who was medically and mentally unstable. It was a calculated, vicious strike. In the corporate world, whispers of instability can kill multi-million-dollar deals overnight. Marcus wanted to scare my clients, dry up my revenue streams, and force me to my knees. He wanted to prove that without his blessing and the protection of his name, I was nothing. Evelyn watched my face closely, waiting for the anger to erupt. She held a cease and desist order in a manila folder ready for my signature. We can file an injunction for defamation and tortious interference with a business contract immediately, she advised, her tone strictly professional, but carrying an edge of protective fury. We can tie him up in litigation for the next 5 years. I looked at the documents. I thought about the smear campaign, the church gossips, Chloe's tearful videos, and Marcus actively trying to bankrupt my company. They were throwing everything they had at me, desperately trying to break my spirit and force me back into my designated role as their silent, suffering benefactor. I pushed the manila folder back across the desk toward Evelyn. "Do not file it," I said smoothly. Evelyn frowned, clearly confused by my lack of retaliation. "Maya, he is actively interfering with a Tier 1 acquisition. You cannot just let him spread malicious lies about your mental competency." "I am not letting him do anything," I replied, my voice cool and measured. "I am giving him exactly enough rope to hang himself. Call the hospital network board member directly. Send them my certified independent psychological evaluation, the clean bill of health from my chief of surgery, and our updated quarterly financial projections showing a 20% profit increase. Show them the truth. Let them see that Marcus is lying, but do not threaten my father legally. Not yet." I stood up and walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window looking out over the city that my family was trying so desperately to turn against me. They were fighting a war of perception. They wanted the community to see them as the victims and me as the villain. They were exhausting all their energy, burning through their social capital and screaming into the digital void, completely unaware that their entire strategy was fundamentally flawed. They thought they were destroying my reputation, but all they were doing was distracting themselves. They were so focused on trying to ruin my business that they failed to realize I had already bought theirs. I turned back to Evelyn, a sharp, dangerous smile curving my lips. "Let them have the church. Let them have social media. Let Chloe cry on camera and let Marcus play the concerned father. Keep the legal team on standby, Evelyn, because tomorrow we are going to start reviewing the Sterling Construction debt portfolio, and I want to know exactly how fast we can execute a foreclosure." The air in my parents' affluent suburban neighborhood was thick with the suffocating humidity of an Atlanta Sunday afternoon. For decades, the Sunday dinner had been the cornerstone of Vivian's social calendar. It was a weekly performance piece, disguised as a family gathering, a place where the silver was polished, the roasted brisket and candied yams were laid out flawlessly, and the gossip flowed as freely as the sweet tea. Today was particularly significant. Spencer and his parents were in attendance, marking the official merging of our family with their supposed old money dynasty. I parked my sleek black sedan right behind Spencer's imported luxury SUV. I did not wear the casual sundress expected for a weekend barbecue. I wore a tailored, razor-sharp crimson power suit and stiletto heels that clicked against the concrete driveway like the ticking of a bomb. I did not bother to ring the doorbell. I simply pulled out my heavy brass key, unlocked the mahogany front door, and stepped inside the house that my corporate dividends had saved from foreclosure 3 times. The low hum of R&B music drifting from the backyard patio clashed with the booming laughter echoing from the formal dining room. I walked slowly down the hallway, the sound of my heels announcing my arrival before I even crossed the threshold. As I stepped into the dining room, the atmosphere shifted with violent immediacy. It was as if someone had sucked all the oxygen out of the room. Forks froze halfway to mouths. The cheerful chatter evaporated into a heavy, suffocating silence. Vivian was seated at the head of the long mahogany table mid-sentence, holding a crystal wine glass. When her eyes locked onto mine, the blood completely drained from her face, leaving her pristine makeup looking like a chalky mask. Marcus stood up abruptly from the opposite end of the table, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. Chloe, seated next to Spencer, let out a sharp, theatrical gasp and clutched his arm as if I had just walked in holding a weapon. Seated across from them were 2 older white people I immediately recognized as Spencer's parents. They looked thoroughly confused by the sudden terror gripping their future in-laws. "What are you doing here?" Marcus demanded, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and panic. "This is a private family dinner. You were not invited." I pulled out an empty chair right in the middle of the table, sitting down with slow, deliberate grace. I crossed my legs and rested my hands on the pristine linen tablecloth. "I paid for the table you are sitting at, Marcus," I said, my voice projecting clearly across the dead silent room. I paid for the chandelier hanging over your head. I paid the property taxes on this private family home last quarter. I will sit wherever I please. Aunt Valerie, who was seated a few chairs down, slammed her napkin onto her plate. She was Vivian's fiercest ally in the church gossip circle. Have you lost your mind? Maya Valerie hissed, leaning forward. How dare you come into your parents' house and speak to them this way in front of company? You have brought nothing but shame to this family since you turned your back on your own sister. I slowly turned my gaze to Valerie. The icy calmness in my eyes made her physically shrink back into her chair. Do you want to talk about shame, Valerie? I asked softly. Let us talk about the $10,000 loan you begged me for last Christmas to keep your bakery from going under. The loan you swore to keep secret from Vivian because you did not want her knowing you were broke. Should we discuss that shame right now in front of the macaroni and cheese? Valerie's mouth snapped shut. She looked away, her face burning crimson, completely neutralized in less than 30 seconds. Spencer let out a loud, condescending sigh. He leaned back in his chair, draping his arm protectively around Chloe's shoulders. He looked at me with the tired, patronizing expression of a man who believed his skin color and his zip code made him the smartest person in the room. Look, Maya Spencer said, his tone dripping with unearned superiority. Chloe told me you have been going through a really tough time lately. We know you had a health scare, and sometimes people suffer mental breaks after severe trauma. Acting out like this, coming in here and throwing a tantrum over money, it is not a good look. I tilted my head, studying him like a fascinating insect trapped in a jar. A mental break, I repeated smoothly. Spencer offered a tight, arrogant smile. It happens. You run a little medical billing service, right? The stress must be getting to you. If your little company is going under, my father and I were just talking about expanding the administrative pool at Sterling Construction. We could probably find a receptionist desk for you. You know, just to help you get back on your feet until you stabilize. Chloe smirked, burying her face into Spencer's shoulder to hide her triumphant smile. She thought her fiancé had just put me in my place. She thought the old money white savior had arrived to humiliate the bitter, jealous older sister. I did not raise my voice. I did not show an ounce of anger. I simply smiled back at him, a smile so devoid of warmth it caused Spencer's father to shift uncomfortably in his seat across the table. Sterling Construction, I said, letting the name roll off my tongue slowly. That is a very generous offer, Spencer, especially considering the current state of the commercial real estate market. I hear it is an incredibly difficult quarter for family-owned construction firms, particularly when a company has defaulted on their employee healthcare premiums for 3 consecutive quarters and is dodging phone calls from their commercial creditors. The arrogant smirk vanished from Spencer's face instantly. He sat up straight, his arm dropping from Chloe's shoulders. His father, sitting across the table, dropped his fork entirely. It clattered loudly against his ceramic plate. I do not know what you are talking about. Spencer stammered, his neck flushing a mottled shade of red. Our company is perfectly fine. You are just making things up because you are jealous of our wedding. I reached into the leather portfolio I had brought with me and pulled out a single sheet of paper. I slid it across the smooth wood of the dining table directly in front of Spencer. I am a lot of things, Spencer, but I am not a liar, I said, my voice carrying the lethal precision of an executioner. That is a summary of the $15 million in delinquent medical insurance debt that Sterling Construction currently owes. Your father has been desperately trying to find a buyer for that debt to stave off a corporate bankruptcy filing. Spencer's father was staring at the paper, his breathing suddenly shallow and rapid. Chloe looked back and forth between her fiancé and his parents, completely lost, watching her fairy tale illusion fracture in real time. What does this have to do with anything? Vivian interjected, her voice shrill and panicked, desperate to stop the bleeding. I kept my eyes locked on Spencer. It has everything to do with this dinner, I replied smoothly, because the corporate entity that purchased that massive crushing debt yesterday afternoon was my little medical billing service. I own you, Spencer. I own your father's company. I own your legacy. I am the only reason your family is not currently standing in a welfare line. The absolute devastation in the dining room was palpable. Spencer's mother looked like she was about to faint. Spencer opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. The illusion of his generational wealth had just been publicly slaughtered by a black woman he had tried to offer a receptionist job to 3 minutes earlier. Chloe leaped up from her chair, her face twisted in a mask of pure panic and rage. "Stop lying, Maya. Stop it right now. You are just trying to ruin my wedding. You cannot do this to us." I stood up slowly, smoothing the invisible wrinkles from my crimson suit. I turned my attention to my father, who was staring at me with a look of absolute, unadulterated terror. He finally realized that the daughter he had tried to professionally sabotage had been 10 steps ahead of him the entire time. I reached into my portfolio one last time and pulled out a thick, legal-bound document. I tossed it onto the center of the dining table right next to the roasted brisket. "I am not ruining the wedding, Chloe," I said coldly. "I am just cleaning house. Marcus Vivian, that is the formal legal notification that I have officially removed myself as the guarantor on the home equity line of credit you took out on this property last year to pay for your luxury cars. Since your credit cards are canceled and you have no liquid income, the bank will begin foreclosure proceedings in exactly 30 days. Vivian let out a strangled, breathless sob, clutching the edge of the table to keep from collapsing. I turned around and began walking toward the foyer. The sound of my stilettos echoed through the silent house once again. I paused at the front door and looked back over my shoulder at the ruined Sunday dinner. "Thank you for the hospitality," I said, my voice echoing clearly down the hallway. "But I recommend you all start packing. You have a lot of moving boxes to fill." The heavy mahogany front door slammed open before I could even unlock my sedan. The sound echoed like a gunshot across the manicured lawns of my parents' quiet suburban street. "Hold on a second. Stop right there." I paused with my hand on the door handle and slowly turned around. Spencer was marching down the paved driveway, his designer loafers slapping aggressively against the concrete. The polished, aristocratic demeanor he had worn in the dining room was completely gone. His face was flushed, his tie slightly loosened, and his fists were clenched at his sides. He had chased me out of the house, desperate to reclaim the power I had just stripped from him in front of his parents and his future in-laws. I leaned against the sleek black frame of my car, crossing my arms over my crimson suit. I did not say a word. I simply waited, letting him close the distance, watching him try to inflate his chest to physically intimidate me. "You think you just pulled off some massive corporate coup in there, do you not?" Spencer sneered, stopping a few feet away. He pointed a finger at me, his voice dripping with the kind of condescension that is bred into men who have never been told no. "You walk in here, throw around some big numbers, and expect us to bow down. Let me explain something to you, Maya. You run a glorified collection agency. You process copays and argue with receptionists over coding errors. Buying a fraction of our corporate debt on the secondary market does not make you a player. It makes you a nuisance." He let out a scoff, shaking his head as if he were dealing with an unruly child who did not understand how the real world worked. "My father's conglomerate has been building this state for 3 generations. We have hard assets you could not even dream of comprehending. Commercial high-rises, industrial fleets, government contracts. You honestly think a boutique billing service has the leverage to threaten a legacy firm like Sterling Construction?" He took another step closer, lowering his voice into a patronizing register. "You overplayed your hand. Our lawyers will tie your little company up in injunctions for the next decade. We will bleed your legal fund dry before you even get a hearing date. So why do you not get in your car, drive back to your office, and send us a settlement offer we can actually ignore?" I did not flinch. I did not raise my voice. I looked at him with the precise clinical detachment of a surgeon examining a terminal diagnosis. "Hard assets," I repeated, letting the words hang in the thick, humid air. "That is a fascinating choice of terminology, Spencer, because in my line of work, a hard asset is only valuable if it is not currently acting as collateral for 3 different predatory bridge loans." Spencer's jaw tightened, but he tried to maintain his arrogant smirk. "You have no idea what you are talking about." "Oh, I know exactly what I am talking about," I replied smoothly, unleashing the exposition I had meticulously memorized from my forensic audit of his bloodline. "Let us talk about those commercial high-rises. You mean the 2 unfinished luxury condominiums in Midtown? The ones where construction halted completely 6 weeks ago because you failed to pay your primary steel vendors. Or perhaps you mean your industrial fleet, which your chief financial officer secretly leveraged twice to cover your EPA fines from that botched development in Savannah. The smirk vanished entirely. His eyes widened, the pupils contracting as panic began to override his entitlement. You want to talk about corporate finance, Spencer? Let us talk about your frozen cash flow. I continued, my voice sharp and unrelenting. Sterling Construction has not generated actual liquid revenue in 8 months. Your accounts receivable are a wasteland. You have been shuffling money between shell companies just to make it look like you can meet payroll. But you and I both know that your emergency corporate credit lines were tapped out in February. He swallowed hard, this Adam's apple bobbing in his throat. He took a half step backward, the physical intimidation crumbling under the weight of my financial omniscience. You have no liquid cash, I stated, stepping forward, invading his space, just as he had tried to invade mine. Your cash flow is not just tight, it is completely paralyzed. That is why your father could not secure a standard operational loan to pay the employee medical insurance premiums. He had to float it. He defaulted. And when the major lenders looked at your books, they did not see a legacy firm. They saw a toxic asset wrapped in a white old money facade. Spencer opened his mouth to speak, but he was completely suffocating on the truth. The banks refused to bail you out, I pressed on, hammering the final nails into his coffin. They bundled your delinquent debt and auctioned it off to the highest bidder at 50 cents on the dollar. And the highest bidder was the black woman you just offered a receptionist job to. You cannot foreclose, he stammered, his voice cracking, shedding all of its aristocratic arrogance. The optics alone. The state government relies on our contracts. We have relationships. We have history in this city. History does not pay the bills, Spencer, I said coldly. And those relationships you rely on, they sold you to me. They decided you were a liability. At that exact moment, the front door of the house swung open again. Chloe stumbled out onto the porch looking frantic and disheveled. Vivian was right behind her, wringing her hands, her eyes darting nervously between Spencer and me. They were desperate to salvage the wreckage I had just left on their dining room table. "Spencer, honey, please," Chloe called out, hurrying down the porch steps. "Do not listen to her. She is just trying to cause drama. My parents are going to fix this. My dad has investments. We can." I held up my hand, stopping Chloe dead in her tracks. I looked from my sister's desperate face to Spencer's horrified realization, the ultimate devastating irony of this entire suburban masquerade clicking perfectly into place. "Do you want to tell him, Chloe, or should I?" I asked, a dark, chilling amusement coloring my tone. "Tell him what," Spencer demanded, looking wildly between the two of us. "Why your parents are sitting in there looking like they just attended a funeral," I said. I looked right at Spencer, delivering the final fatal blow to his generational pride. "Why do you think your father agreed to let Marcus and Vivian pay for this extravagant $200,000 wedding, Spencer? You thought it was because they were being generous, but your father knew he did not have the cash to cover it." Spencer stared at me, the color draining from his face as the realization hit him. "Your parents came here today to secure a marriage into a wealthy black family because they desperately needed Marcus's supposed capital to bail out your frozen cash flow," I explained, spelling out the absolute tragedy of their situation. "And Marcus needed your whiteness, your country club name, to elevate his social standing and prove to his church friends that he had finally arrived. He was willing to bleed me dry to buy his way into your world." Chloe let out a strangled sob, covering her mouth with her hands. "But there is no money, Spencer," I said, my voice echoing in the quiet driveway. "I cut them off a month ago. Marcus is broke. The house you are standing in front of is going into foreclosure. The luxury cars in the garage are going to be repossessed. You thought you were marrying into a safety net, and Marcus thought he was buying a legacy. But it is just a transaction between two completely bankrupt households." I watched the absolute horror wash over Spencer as he looked at my sister, not with love, but with the cold, calculating realization that she was entirely useless to his survival. He had brought nothing to the table, and he had just discovered that she was bringing even less. "It is a merger of zeros," I said softly. I turned away from his stunned, ashen face and opened my car door. I slid into the driver's seat, the leather cool and comforting against my back. I started the engine, the powerful purr of the motor cutting through the oppressive silence of the driveway. Through the windshield, I saw Vivian step off the porch, reaching her hand out towards Spencer in a pathetic, desperate gesture of appeasement. Spencer did not even look at her. He simply turned his back on my family and began walking numbly toward his own vehicle, leaving Chloe sobbing in the middle of the driveway. I shifted the car into drive and slowly pulled out onto the street. I did not look in the rearview mirror. I had exposed their lies, dismantled their pride, and left them standing in the exact poverty they had tried so ruthlessly to escape. The fortress they had built on my back had completely collapsed, and I was driving away from the rubble. The morning of the wedding arrived, not with the peaceful ringing of church bells, but with a violent, desperate storm of corporate sabotage. I was standing in my kitchen pouring a cup of black coffee when my secure line began to chime incessantly. The digital clock on my microwave read 6 in the morning. I pressed the flashing green button on the console, knowing exactly who would be calling at this hour. Evelyn was on the other end, and the usual polished calm of my lead attorney had been replaced by the sharp, rapid cadence of a woman navigating an active minefield. "Maya, we have a massive coordinated breach," Evelyn announced, the sound of her typing furiously echoing through the speaker. Marcus and Vivian did not spend their final 24 hours mourning their lost credit lines. They have gone absolutely nuclear. They are actively trying to dismantle your entire corporate infrastructure. I took a slow sip of my coffee, feeling the dark, bitter liquid ground me. "Tell me everything," I said softly. Evelyn briefed me with lethal precision. Marcus had weaponized his decades of membership in Atlanta's most elite black business fraternities and exclusive country clubs. He knew he could not touch my bank accounts directly, so he decided to attack my revenue streams. He had spent the entire night calling in every favor, every old boys club connection, and every golf course handshake he had accumulated over the last 30 years. His primary target was Harrison Wright, the chief executive of the data logistics firm that hosted nearly 40% of my company's medical billing cloud infrastructure. Marcus told Harrison that you are currently under a shadow federal investigation for corporate embezzlement. Evelyn explained, her voice tightening with disgust. Marcus claimed that your recent hospitalization was actually a cover for a severe psychiatric hold, and that you are liquidating assets to flee the country. He leveraged their 30-year fraternity bond to convince Harrison to invoke the moral turpitude clause in our hosting contract. Harrison just sent us a legal notice stating he is shutting down our servers at noon today. If our servers go dark, we cannot process the daily billing cycles for 7 major hospitals. It would cost us millions in breach of contract penalties by the end of the business day. My father was truly a cornered animal, willing to burn down the very empire that had funded his lavish lifestyle just to maintain his illusion of control. He wanted to paralyze my business, panic my clients, and force me to my knees on the exact day I was supposed to be financing his daughter's extravagant wedding. Patch Harrison threw to my line immediately. I instructed, placing my coffee mug down on the marble counter. "Get him on a recorded conference call right now." It took Evelyn less than 3 minutes to get the logistics executive on the line. When Harrison spoke, his tone dripped with that specific brand of patriarchal condescension, treating me like a reckless child rather than the chief executive officer of a highly profitable enterprise. "Maya, I am only taking this call out of respect for your father," Harrison began smoothly. "Marcus is a good man, a pillar of this community. It breaks my heart to see what you are putting him through. But business is business. I cannot have my data centers associated with federal fraud investigations and mental instability. We are pulling the plug on your servers at noon. You brought this on yourself by disrespecting your family." I let his arrogant words hang in the air for a brief moment. "Harrison," I replied, my voice carrying the absolute chill of a winter storm, "I strongly suggest you open the encrypted file my legal team just delivered to your private email inbox. I will give you 10 seconds to review it before I continue." I listened to the heavy silence on the line, followed by the faint click of a computer mouse. I knew exactly what Evelyn had sent him. It was a comprehensive, undeniable ledger of transactions. What you are looking at, Harrison, is a highly detailed banking record from the platinum credit card I issued to my father 5 years ago. I explained, methodically. You will notice several very interesting charges from last summer. Specifically, the $30,000 charter flight to the Bahamas and the $40,000 luxury villa rental. The villa where you, my father, and two other board members spent a week entertaining company that was definitely not your wives. My corporate accounts paid for your illicit vacation, Harrison. My money funded your indiscretions. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. The arrogant, condescending tone had completely evaporated, replaced by the suffocating realization that he had just walked into a trap. If my servers go dark at noon, I continued, my voice razor sharp. That entire ledger, along with the names of your travel companions, goes directly to your wife, your board of directors, and the local press. You are not dealing with Marcus's obedient little girl, Harrison. You are dealing with your primary benefactor. You will rescind that contract termination notice immediately, and you will offer my company a 20% discount on our hosting fees for the inconvenience of this morning's phone call. Do we have an understanding? Yes, Maya, Harrison whispered, his voice trembling with sheer panic. The notice is rescinded. I apologize for the misunderstanding. I disconnected the call without another word. One threat eliminated, but Evelyn was already queuing up the next crisis. Vivian has been just as busy, Evelyn reported, seamlessly shifting to the next disaster. She mobilized her entire network within the city's most exclusive women's philanthropic societies. She personally contacted your minority angel investors last night. She spun a tragic, tearful story claiming you have completely lost your grip on reality. She told them you are hoarding family money out of petty jealousy over Chloe's wedding, and that your mental instability is a massive liability. Two of our initial seed investors are demanding an emergency meeting to discuss a vote of no confidence. My mother was using the ultimate societal weapon against me. In our community, the expectation that a successful Black woman must carry the financial weight of her entire extended family is an unspoken law. Vivian was weaponizing that Black tax, painting me as a selfish, bitter pariah who abandoned her family at their most vulnerable hour. She knew the investors would panic at the thought of a CEO spiraling into a personal vendetta. Send the investors our updated quarterly profit margins, the certified independent psychological evaluation I completed last month, and a direct buyout offer I commanded pacing across the hardwood floor of my penthouse. Tell them that if they believe the malicious gossip of a woman who just had her luxury credit lines permanently revoked, I will happily buy out their shares at current market value by 5 o'clock today. Let them choose between Vivian's country club rumors and my certified multi-million-dollar returns. Evelyn chuckled, the sound sharp and victorious. They will not sell. The moment they see those profit margins and realize Vivian is just a disgruntled cut-off dependent, they will back down completely. But there was one final attack. The most desperate, reckless maneuver of them all. Maya. There is one more thing, Evelyn said, her voice dropping into a serious, grave register. This one crosses the line into federal territory. We just received an alert from our corporate banking fraud division. Marcus attempted to open a shadow corporate credit line at 3 in the morning. He tried to authorize a wire transfer of $80,000 to pay the final balances for the catering, floral, and staging vendors at the Magnolia Estate for the wedding tonight. My blood ran completely cold. He tried to open a corporate account. Yes, Evelyn confirmed. He used your company's tax identification number, and he electronically forged your signature on the authorization forms. He thought he could bypass the personal account freeze by tapping directly into the corporate treasury. The fraud department flagged it instantly because the IP address traced back to his home computer. Maya. This is wire fraud. It is identity theft. We have the digital footprint, the application, and the forged signature. We can have him arrested before the wedding even begins. My parents had truly lost their minds. In their frantic, suffocating desperation to save face in front of Spencer's supposedly elite white family, they had committed a federal crime. Marcus was willing to risk a prison sentence just to ensure the champagne flowed and the imported orchids were arranged perfectly on the tables. They were completely blinded by their obsession with status. Do not call the authorities, I said, a slow, dangerous clarity washing over my entire being. Evelyn gasped in shock. Maya? He committed a felony. You cannot protect him from this. I am not protecting him. Evelyn, I replied, my voice echoing in the quiet of my kitchen. I want you to print the entire fraud report. Every IP trace, every forged document, and every declined vendor invoice. Put it in a red folder and send it to my penthouse via secure courier immediately. I walked toward my bedroom, my eyes fixed on the immaculate razor-sharp white power suit waiting on my bed. My family had tried to destroy my business, assassinate my character, and steal my corporate funds all in the span of 12 hours. They had fired their last desperate shots entirely unaware that their weapons were empty. I am going to deliver this evidence personally, I told Evelyn, running my hand along the crisp lapel of the white blazer. Let the vendors finish setting up the estate. Let the guests arrive. Let Spencer's family take their seats in the front row. I will see you at the Magnolia Estate at 4 o'clock. The Magnolia Estate was bathed in the golden honeyed light of late afternoon. It was a scene ripped straight from the pages of an elite bridal magazine, exactly the kind of flawless, aristocratic illusion Vivian had bled me dry to create. Over 200 of Atlanta's highest society members mingled on the immaculate emerald lawns, sipping vintage champagne from crystal flutes. A 12-piece string quartet played softly in the background, their classical notes drifting through the ancient moss-draped oak trees. Thousands of imported white orchids cascaded from massive floral arches, framing the pristine aisle where my sister planned to officially secure her social elevation. Every single detail, from the towering multi-tiered cake visible on the grand terrace to the monogrammed silk napkins, screamed of generational wealth, and every single detail was a meticulously constructed, highly flammable lie. The heavy iron gates of the estate had remained open for the arriving guests, and my black sedan glided smoothly past the valet stand. I stepped out of the vehicle, the crunch of my stilettos on the crushed gravel path instantly drawing the attention of the nearest attendees. I was wearing the razor-sharp, custom-tailored white power suit I had selected earlier. In traditional wedding etiquette, wearing pristine white to another woman's ceremony is the ultimate unforgivable declaration of war. It is a visual assault designed to steal focus from the bride. But I was not a guest attending a family celebration. I was the landlord surveying my newly acquired property, the primary creditor coming to collect, and the executioner of their grand illusion. I dressed exactly as the occasion required. I held my leather briefcase in one hand, the heavy red folder containing the irrefutable proof of my father's federal wire fraud tucked neatly inside. I began my walk up the sweeping pathway toward the main terrace. The camera of my reality seemed to track me, perfectly capturing the rippling, devastating effect my presence had on the crowd. The polite, hushed conversations of the elite guests began to falter, replaced by a tense, electric murmuring. Heads turned. Champagne flutes were lowered. The high society women who had spent the last week actively participating in Vivian's smear campaign against me suddenly found themselves face to face with the villain of their Sunday sermons. I did not look away. I met their shocked, judgmental gazes with absolute terrifying calm. I walked with the unhurried, dominant rhythm of a woman who held the deed to the very ground they were standing on. I could hear the frantic whispering as I moved deeper into the crowd. I recognized faces from our church congregation, the same people who had left me blistering voicemails condemning my lack of familial loyalty. They stared at me wide-eyed, clearly shocked that the allegedly mentally unstable, bitter sister had the audacity to crash the most anticipated social event of the season. The sea of pastel dresses and tailored tuxedos naturally parted for me, their silent judgment creating a wide, unobstructed path directly to the front of the ceremony seating. Standing near the massive floral archway were the key players of this fraudulent production, entirely oblivious to the financial guillotine hovering over their heads. Marcus was nervously adjusting his tuxedo cuffs, desperately trying to project the image of a wealthy, secure patriarch, while silently sweating over the $80,000 in wire fraud he had committed the night before. Spencer stood nearby, flanked by his supposedly aristocratic parents. They were all smiling tightly, making polite conversation, completely unaware that their corporate execution was scheduled for exactly 5 o'clock, and their construction empire was currently in its death throes. And there was Vivian fussing over the impossibly long train of Chloe's $20,000 Vera Wang gown. Chloe looked like a porcelain doll dripping in diamonds that were likely purchased on a maxed-out credit card Marcus had illegally authorized. They were living in the absolute peak of their delusions, soaking in the admiration of the crowd, believing they had successfully navigated their way into the elite class. Vivian saw me first. The artificial camera-ready smile froze on her face. Then it completely shattered, melting off her features as if exposed to battery acid. She gripped Chloe's arm with such sudden force that her perfectly manicured nails visibly dug into the white silk of the bridal gown. Chloe spun around, annoyed by the tug, but her eyes widened in sheer, unadulterated panic the moment they locked onto my white suit. For a fraction of a second, the absolute audacity of my arrival paralyzed them both. They simply stared, their mouths slightly open, processing the visual shock of the daughter they had discarded marching into their kingdom. Then the panic violently morphed into defensive, explosive rage. Vivian lunged forward, stepping away from the bridal party and intercepting my path just before I reached the front row of white wooden chairs. Her voice sliced through the delicate, soothing music of the string quartet, harsh and grating against the refined atmosphere. "What are you doing here?" Vivian shrieked, her aristocratic facade entirely abandoned in the face of her fury. Her eyes darted wildly around the lawn, hyper-aware of the hundreds of wealthy guests now openly staring at the escalating drama. "You were expressly forbidden from setting foot on this property. You are not welcome here, Maya." Chloe joined the fray, gathering the heavy skirts of her gown and marching up right beside our mother. Her face was flushed with a mixture of terror and entitlement. Her voice bordered on hysterical, echoing across the manicured gardens for everyone to hear. "You are wearing white to my wedding," Chloe screamed, pointing a shaking finger at my chest. "You sick, jealous, pathetic woman! You just could not stand to see me happy. You could not stand that I am marrying into a better family than you could ever buy your way into. Get out!" Marcus finally registered the commotion. He pushed his way through the crowd of groomsmen, his face a terrifying shade of ashen gray. The moment he saw the red folder clutched in my hand, I saw his throat swallow hard. He knew exactly what it was, and the realization that his federal crime had been discovered anchored him to the grass. He did not say a word. He simply stared at me, with the wide, terrified eyes of a man standing on the gallows. Spencer, entirely oblivious to the corporate ruin lurking in my briefcase, stepped forward to play the role of the gallant protector. He puffed out his chest, glaring down at me with absolute disdain. "Maya, you have made your point. You threw your little tantrum and cut off your family, but coming here to ruin Chloe's day is a new low. Leave immediately before things get ugly." I did not raise my voice. I did not break my posture. I remained perfectly still, a pillar of absolute ice in the sweltering heat of their panic. I looked at Vivian, then at Chloe, and finally at Spencer. "I am not going anywhere," I said smoothly, my voice carrying effortlessly through the sudden silence of the garden. Vivian's face contorted with supreme indignation. She spun around frantically, signaling to the perimeter of the estate. Two heavily built private security guards employed by the luxury property management company immediately stepped forward from the shadows of the oak trees. They moved quickly toward us, their expressions stern, their hands resting on their utility belts. Vivian pointed her finger directly at my face, her voice rising to a frantic, commanding screech that demanded the attention of every single guest on the lawn. "Security," Vivian shouted, her chest heaving. "Grab this woman and throw her out right now. She is a trespasser, she is mentally unstable, and she does not belong here. Remove her from my wedding immediately." The guards closed the distance, stepping squarely into the aisle, standing just inches away from my pristine white suit. The entire wedding party held their collective breath, waiting for the humiliating spectacle of me being physically dragged off the emerald lawn. The lead guard, a towering man named Jackson, who managed the estate's private security detail, reached out his hand. But he did not reach for my arm to drag me away. He reached for his earpiece, tapped it once to silence his radio, and then took a very deliberate, perfectly synchronized step back. He crossed his hands in front of his tactical vest and gave me a deep, respectful bow of his head. "Everything is secure on the perimeter," Miss Maya Jackson said, his deep voice carrying clearly over the manicured lawn. "Do you need us to escort the trespassers off your property?" Vivian's jaw dropped so fast I thought it might unhinge. The triumphant sneer she had been wearing instantly dissolved into a mask of pure, unadulterated confusion. She looked from Jackson to me, then back to Jackson, her eyes blinking rapidly as her brain short-circuited trying to process the interaction. "What are you talking about?" Vivian shrieked, her voice cracking under the strain of her rising panic. "I rented this venue. I paid the deposit. I am the client. Grab her. I demand you remove her right now." Jackson did not even glance in my mother's direction. He kept his eyes locked respectfully on me, waiting for his employer's command. I smiled, a slow, predatory curving of my lips. "Stand down, Jackson," I instructed smoothly. "I will handle the tenant dispute from here." I stepped around Vivian, who was now frozen like a statue of pure horror, and walked directly toward the altar. The officiant, a hired minister who looked absolutely terrified by the escalating hostility, quickly stepped aside as I approached the podium. I reached out and took the wireless microphone from its stand. I tapped the top of it twice. The sharp, percussive thud echoed through the massive surround sound speakers hidden in the ancient oak trees, instantly commanding the attention of every single person on the sprawling lawn. 200 of Atlanta's highest society members sat in dead, suffocating silence. "Good afternoon, everyone," I said, my voice rich, calm, and echoing with absolute authority. "Please forgive the brief interruption to the schedule. I know you are all eager to witness this beautiful union. However, as the new legal owner of the Magnolia Estate, I felt it was my duty to personally welcome you to my property." A collective audible gasp ripped through the audience. I watched the realization detonate across the front row. Vivian stumbled backward, her designer heels sinking into the soft grass, catching herself on the edge of a floral arrangement to keep from collapsing. Chloe let out a strangled, breathless noise, dropping her lavish bouquet of imported white orchids onto the ground. The flowers shattered against the stone walkway. "Yes," I continued, my gaze sweeping over the horrified faces of the church elders and the elite socialites who had spent the last week actively participating in my smear campaign. "I purchased this entire estate 3 weeks ago through one of my corporate trusts. Which means that Vivian is not the grand society hostess she has been playing all afternoon. She is simply my temporary, currently defaulting tenant." I turned my attention away from my hyperventilating mother and locked eyes directly with Spencer. He was standing rigidly at the altar, his face a terrifying shade of pale gray. His parents, seated in the front row of the groom's side, looked completely paralyzed. The arrogant old money aristocratic illusion was about to be publicly slaughtered. "But real estate is not the only asset I acquired this month," I announced, my voice dropping into a lethal corporate register. I unlatched the brass locks of my leather briefcase. The sharp clicks echoed through the microphone. I pulled out the heavy red folder. Marcus visibly staggered in his placeline. I watched his knees buckle slightly as all the blood rushed from his head. He thought I was holding the evidence of his 3 in the morning wire fraud. He thought I was about to announce his federal crimes to the congregation. He was sweating profusely, practically choking on his own terror. But I let him sweat. His execution could wait. Right now, I had a different corporate corpse to bury. I held the folder up for the entire Sterling family to see. "Spencer," I said, addressing him directly through the speakers, "you stood in my dining room on Sunday and offered me a receptionist job because you thought my company was failing. You paraded your generational wealth in front of my family, acting like a benevolent savior descending from the upper class. But we both know the truth now, do we not? We both know that Sterling Construction has been technically insolvent for 14 months. Spencer's father leaped up from his white wooden chair. His face was flushed with absolute panic and indignation. "Now listen here," he bellowed, attempting to salvage his dignity in front of the whispering crowd. "You cannot spout these slanderous lies in public. I will sue you for defamation. It is not defamation if it is an objective financial fact, I replied smoothly, projecting my voice to easily drown him out. I am looking at the certified ledger of the $15 million in delinquent medical insurance debt your company owes. You raided your own employees' healthcare fund to pay for your luxury car leases and your country club dues. You are completely bankrupt. You are drowning. And you thought marrying my sister would give you access to the Bank of Maya to quietly bail you out. The crowd erupted into frantic, scandalous whispering. Women were covering their mouths. Men were pulling out their phones to text their business partners. The Sterling family's elite reputation was disintegrating in real time. Spencer took a step toward me, his fists clenched, his aristocratic mask completely abandoned. "Shut your mouth," he hissed, his voice shaking with furious humiliation. "You do not know anything about our corporate structure. I know that my company purchased your entire $15 million debt portfolio. At 10 o'clock this morning, I countered, delivering the final fatal blow. I am your primary creditor, Spencer. I own your father's company. I own your legacy. I own the very ground you are standing on right now." I looked down at the diamond-encrusted Rolex watch on my wrist. It is currently 4:45 in the afternoon. According to the formal demand letter my legal team delivered to your corporate headquarters hours ago, you are in severe technical default. You have exactly 15 minutes to wire $15 million in cash to my corporate treasury. I lowered the microphone slightly, letting the sheer gravity of the ultimatum crush the remaining oxygen out of the garden. If that wire transfer does not clear by exactly 5 o'clock, I will electronically file an involuntary. Chapter 11 Bankruptcy Petition against Sterling Construction. I will freeze your operational accounts. I will seize your commercial assets, your heavy machinery, and the very house your parents are sleeping in tonight. I will force a total devastating liquidation by Monday morning. Spencer's mother let out a loud, high-pitched wail and collapsed back into her chair, fanning herself frantically with her wedding program. Spencer's father looked like he was having a cardiac event, his hand clutching his chest as the reality of his total financial ruin set in. The great, untouchable white elite family had just been brought to their knees by the black woman they had tried to step on. Chloe grabbed Spencer's arm, her face stained with black streaks of ruined mascara. "Spencer, tell her she is lying," Chloe sobbed, shaking his arm desperately. "Tell her you have the money. Tell her you are rich. We are supposed to be rich." Spencer violently yanked his arm out of Chloe's grip. He looked at her with pure, unadulterated disgust. The mutual con job had failed. The illusion was dead. There was no money left to steal from either side. They were just two broke, desperate frauds staring at each other over the ashes of their fake empires. I tapped the microphone one last time, ensuring every single guest heard my final decree. "You have 14 minutes, Spencer. I highly suggest you stop worrying about this wedding and start calling your bankruptcy attorneys." The silence that followed my ultimatum was absolute, a heavy, suffocating vacuum that stretched over the manicured lawn. Then the entire illusion violently fractured. Spencer's mother, a woman who had spent the entire afternoon looking down her nose at my parents, suddenly turned on Vivian with the ferocity of a cornered animal. "You told us you owned this estate." Spencer's mother shrieked, her aristocratic poise completely disintegrating. She pointed a trembling finger at Vivian. "You sat at my dining room table and bragged about your vast real estate portfolio. You said your daughter was an heiress to a corporate empire. You are nothing but a common fraud." Vivian stumbled backward, clutching her chest as if she had been physically struck. She looked frantically around the garden, her eyes wide with terror, as she realized the hundreds of elite guests, the church elders, and the high society philanthropists were watching her entire fabricated life collapse. "No," Vivian stammered, her voice shrill and desperate. "We are wealthy. Maya is just lying. She is mentally unstable. I swear to you we have the money." But the lie had run out of oxygen. Spencer's father marched directly up to Marcus, his face a terrifying shade of crimson. "You set us up!" he bellowed, grabbing Marcus by the lapels of his rented tuxedo. "You knew we were facing liquidity issues. You promised us an infusion of capital from your family trust to finalize this union. You let me believe I was securing my company's future, but you do not have a dime to your name. You are a broke, pathetic liar. Marcus did not fight back. The great imposing patriarch of our family simply wilted. He looked at the red folder in my hand, knowing that his fake wealth was not his biggest problem. His biggest problem was the federal wire fraud evidence I had brought with me. He raised his hands in a gesture of total surrender, his shoulders slumping as the weight of his imminent ruin crushed him. At the altar, the fairy tale was coming to a brutal, spectacular end. Chloe grabbed Spencer's arm again, tears ruining her flawless bridal makeup, staining her face with dark, ugly streaks. Spencer, please, Chloe begged, her voice echoing through the silent crowd. We can fix this. We love each other. The money does not matter. Spencer ripped his arm away with such force that Chloe stumbled into the floral archway, sending a shower of expensive white orchids crashing to the stone walkway. Love, Spencer scoffed, his voice dripping with pure, unadulterated venom. You think I am standing up here in this tuxedo for love? I am standing here because your mother promised me a multi-million-dollar safety net. I thought I was marrying a trust fund baby who could bail out my family. But you are just a broke gold digger who cannot even afford her own wedding dress. Chloe gasped, covering her mouth with both hands as the absolute humiliation washed over her. She looked at the guests, at her bridesmaids, at the cameras that were still actively recording the disaster. The wedding is officially off, Spencer announced loudly, not just to Chloe, but to the entire assembly of shocked guests. He ripped the boutonniere from his lapel and threw it onto the grass. Do not bother sitting down for the reception. There is nothing to celebrate here. He turned and marched straight down the aisle, shoving past his own groomsmen. His parents immediately followed suit, his mother covering her face with her program as they practically ran toward the valet stand, desperate to escape the property before the 5 o'clock bankruptcy deadline struck. The chain collapse was instantaneous and absolute. The mutual parasitism had been dragged into the daylight and the host was dead. A chaotic murmur rose from the seating area as the elite guests began to stand up. The social execution of Vivian and Marcus was happening in real time. The senior pastor of our church, the man Vivian had manipulated into delivering a sermon condemning my soul, shook his head in absolute disgust. He gathered his wife and walked past my parents without saying a single word. The wealthy socialites Vivian had desperately tried to court for decades were whispering behind their hands, casting glances of pure pity and revulsion at my mother. They were leaving. They were all leaving. The grand $200,000 wedding had transformed into a social graveyard. Vivian dropped to her knees right there on the pristine grass. Her designer dress pooled around her in a tragic, ruined heap. She buried her face in her hands and began to sob loudly, the sound ragged and broken. She was not crying for the loss of her daughter's marriage. She was mourning the permanent, irreversible death of her social standing. She would never be able to show her face in Atlanta society again. Marcus stood completely paralyzed. His eyes locked onto the red folder in my hand. I walked slowly toward him, the crunch of my stilettos cutting through the sounds of departing guests, and my mother's sobbing. I stopped just 2 feet away from the man who had tried to destroy my business. I am not turning this folder over to the federal authorities today, Marcus, I said, keeping my voice low, meant only for him and Vivian to hear. I am going to let you sit in that house for the next 30 days. I am going to let you pack your belongings while the bank processes the foreclosure. I am going to let you wake up every single morning wondering if today is the day the authorities knock on your door. That is your punishment. The absolute suffocating terror of waiting for the other shoe to drop. Marcus squeezed his eyes shut, a single tear escaping and rolling down his cheek. He had nothing left to say. There were no more threats to make, no more authority to project. He was a defeated, broken man. I turned my attention to a nearby cocktail table, draped in crisp white linen, originally intended for the reception toast. I reached into the pocket of my white blazer and pulled out a crisp, folded piece of paper currency. I smoothed it out and placed it deliberately in the dead center of the table. It was a single $1 bill. Consider this my formal contribution to the wedding fund. I announced, my voice carrying a quiet, lethal finality. It is exactly what this family's loyalty is worth. Good luck. I did not wait for a response. I turned my back on the wreckage of their lives and walked back down the long, sprawling pathway toward the iron gates. The sun was beginning to set, casting long golden shadows across the estate that I now owned. I walked with my head held high, my shoulders relaxed, and my spirit lighter than air. I had paid the family tax for the very last time. I stepped into my waiting car, closed the door, and told the driver to take me home. The camera pulls back, slowly gliding alongside the sleek black sedan as it rolls away from the heavy iron gates of the Magnolia estate. The manicured lawns and the chaotic wreckage of the wedding fade into the distance, becoming nothing more than a blurry footnote in my rearview mirror. Inside the quiet sanctuary of the back seat, I sink into the plush leather. The late afternoon sun streams through the tinted window, casting a warm, golden glow across my face. I am not crying. I am not angry. For the first time in 32 years, my chest is completely clear of the suffocating, heavy anxiety that used to define my everyday existence. The ride back to the city is smooth and entirely uninterrupted. There are no frantic phone calls demanding wire transfers. There are no emergency alerts from my wealth manager about maxed out platinum cards. There are no cultural guilt trips waiting for me at the end of the line. There is just the steady, rhythmic hum of the engine carrying me back to the empire I built with my own two hands. When I finally return to my penthouse, the space greets me with the same profound silence it held the day I was discharged from the hospital. I walk into the living room and take a seat on the dark velvet sofa, recreating the exact posture from that afternoon 1 month ago. But the energy in the room has entirely transformed. Back then, I was a woman holding her breath, bracing for the inevitable retaliation. After sending $1 to my mother, I was merely surviving. Today, I am breathing deeply. I am reigning over my life with absolute, unchallenged authority. I look straight ahead, staring directly into the lens of the camera. The lighting catches the sharp, confident angle of my jaw, illuminating a woman who finally knows her exact worth. We are constantly conditioned to believe that blood is an unbreakable contract. We are taught that the family tax is a mandatory toll we must pay for the privilege of our own success. But I learned the hard way that loyalty should never require your total self-destruction. Generosity should never leave you emotionally bankrupt, and love should absolutely never leave you dying alone in a hospital bed while your relatives shop for designer gowns. I lean back against the velvet cushions, a genuine, radiant smile breaking across my face. The heavy shadows in the room seem to recede, leaving only the brilliant, warm light of my own hard-won independence. Family is not those who force you to bleed just so they can wear silk. Family is not a parasitic obligation disguised as cultural duty. Sometimes you have to be the villain in their delusional fairy tale to become the hero of your own reality. Sometimes cutting off rotten roots yourself is the exact and only way you will ever truly bloom. The story of Maya teaches a profound and difficult lesson. Blood does not automatically entitle anyone to your peace, your success, or your life. Society often conditions us to believe that family loyalty is an unbreakable contract, regardless of the emotional or financial cost. However, Maya's journey brilliantly illustrates the devastating reality of toxic family dynamics where love is conditional and generosity is simply mistaken for weakness. The ultimate takeaway is that establishing firm boundaries is not an act of selfishness, it is a vital act of self-preservation. You cannot heal in the same environment that broke you, and you certainly cannot save people who are actively pulling you under just to keep themselves afloat. True family is defined by mutual respect, unconditional support, and genuine care, not by financial exploitation, emotional manipulation, or social climbing. When you are reduced to a mere utility in someone else's life, walking away becomes the only way to survive. Cutting ties with toxic roots requires immense courage, but it is the necessary price for reclaiming your narrative. Ultimately, your self-worth is not determined by how much you can give others, but by how fiercely you are willing to protect yourself. If you have ever had to make the difficult choice to cut off toxic relationships to protect your own peace, share your journey in the comments below and hit subscribe for more empowering stories of resilience.